I knew something was off the second I saw her in my chair. She was leaned back like she owned the oxygen in the room, wearing that same smug smile and navy power suit I'd seen her deploy like war paint at 3 other takeovers. Her hand was already on the armrest, my armrest, like she was daring me to say something. "Mr. Halberd, your presence is no longer required," she said, voice dipped in condescension, lips barely moving. She didn't even look at me when she said it, just gave a slight nod, and like they'd rehearsed it, 2 compliance officers stepped forward, clipboard in hand, security badges pre-printed. You'd think I was an intern caught installing malware, not the operations architect who built the entire infrastructure she just bulldozed her way into. But I didn't flinch, I didn't protest, I didn't raise my voice or make some dramatic speech. I simply reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single folder. No label, no logo. Just white paper and the slow, deliberate sound of a tab sliding open as I placed it on the table in front of her. "Clause 11C, I said quietly, tapping once. She scoffed, loud enough for the board to hear, but not loud enough to seem nervous. "That's not how any of this works." It was cute, really, that dismissive little snort, like I was some bitter relic she'd outmaneuvered. That folder was bait, and she walked right past it, thinking she'd already won. I turned to leave, not saying another word. No one stopped me, not even the CEO. They were all too stunned by the sheer boldness of her move, like watching a substitute teacher kick out the principal mid-assembly. If you're enjoying the story so far, take a second to subscribe and like the video. It helps more than you think, and it keeps the stories coming. Don't be part of the silent 97%. I walked the hallway alone, silent but simmering, each step echoing louder in my chest than in the corridor. Let her have her moment, I thought. Let her flaunt her charts and timelines and department-killing diagrams. Let her sit in that chair thinking it was hers to keep. She had no idea what she'd already signed. No idea what was about to detonate under her borrowed heels. Because at exactly 07:14 that morning, the system registered her e-signature, one she'd forged thinking it would make my exit clean. She wanted me out of the room. What she didn't realize was that by falsifying the handoff protocol, she triggered the most explosive clause in the company's governance charter. Clause 11C wasn't just real, it was designed for exactly this scenario, a power grab without proper succession protocol. And I knew she'd find out the hard way. The irony was almost poetic. She'd spent weeks consolidating authority, restructuring compliance to report directly to her, flattening governance trees like it was spring cleaning. Every time she streamlined, she tripped another silent audit trigger I had personally embedded. And now, with her fake signature time-stamped and verified by the system, the countdown had already begun. Back in the boardroom, she was probably sipping her stupid protein coffee, walking them through her new verticals pitch, oblivious to the fact that the legal diamond had already notified external audit counsel. I didn't need to lift a finger. The dominoes were set, and her downfall had already been authenticated. She took my seat. She forged my name, and she activated a clause she never even read. By the time the board figured out what was really happening, her name would be sitting in the in-review queue under the heading Subject of Internal Misconduct Triggered by Clause 11C Authorization Failure. And all I had to do was wait. I watched from a quiet desk on the mezzanine level, tucked behind the outdated HR kiosk no one used since the interface redesign. Not because I had to be there, not because I'd been officially reassigned, but because sometimes the best view of a crumbling empire is from the floor beneath the throne. She thought revoking my badge meant shutting me out. That one gesture, one digital keystroke, would erase 2 decades of infrastructure I built from the inside. Bless her MBA heart, she didn't realize that access wasn't a badge or a password. It was a map of buried permissions, legacy backdoors, and root-level authorizations that lived across 17 systems and 3 continents. You can fire a person. You can't fire their fingerprints from code. Her first week, she renamed 4 departments without a single compliance notation. That alone triggered 2 silent flags in the legal backend. Week 2, she merged the dual auth privilege system for financial disbursements into a single chain, hers. That one set off a conditional monitoring sequence I'd embedded after the 2019 audit scare. Week 3, she announced a realignment of IT security roles and collapsed 5 sysadmin positions into one glorified gatekeeper with a title but no understanding of recursive access chains. That poor bastard didn't even know his own login token was still pinging from a deprecated VPN tunnel I'd buried in the architecture. And me, my account was labeled inactive. She probably smirked when she saw it in the dashboard, thought she'd declawed the beast. But that label was cosmetic, legacy flagged. Beneath it, the quarterly compliance demon still pinged my credentials against all system modules to verify integrity. Every ping she tripped without knowing added to the stack of evidence already building in the encrypted log vault. You ever watch someone play Jenga with live wires? Her team even pushed a full system update the night before she filed my termination. They thought they were cleaning house. What they didn't realize was that my triggers weren't just digital, they were legal. Every structural alteration in the governance stack required dual signature acknowledgement unless otherwise flagged. And thanks to her reckless eagerness, she deactivated those checks entirely, which meant unilateral moves, which meant no oversight, which meant automatic audit escalation under provision 19.4. I didn't need to interfere, I just kept documenting. My fingers never left the keyboard. My tone stayed neutral. The audit logs didn't care if I was angry or hurt or betrayed. They cared about inputs, irregularities, pattern disruptions, and she was painting them across the system like Jackson Pollock with a blindfold. She gave herself full rights to everything, except the one thing she couldn't see, the root ledger. Because no one, not her, not the CEO, not even the board, ever bothered to understand how deeply the architecture relied on those legacy protocols she so desperately wanted to erase. They weren't dead weight, they were anchors, and she just sawed through them while waving her access wand like a toddler at a magic show. Even after the badge revocation, I still received notifications, quiet ones, routed through a parallel compliance channel marked obsolete, archive only, that no one had touched since 2010, except me. Every morning, I checked the logs over coffee, watched the triggers accumulate, rule breaks, escalation loops, conflicts of authority. They stacked like bricks in a mausoleum she was building around herself. She didn't realize every click she made was already being mirrored to the external compliance cache. She thought the system worked for her now. But systems don't have favorites. They have rules. And she was breaking all of them. The chain reaction wasn't coming. It had already started. Clause 11C sat quietly on page 23 of the governance charter, tucked between vacation accrual contingencies and the remote work exception protocol. I doubt she even reached it. Too dry, too dense. Too legacy, in her words. The kind of thing she probably bragged about skimming while she was still in grad school, sipping espresso and highlighting buzzwords she didn't understand. It wasn't designed to dazzle. It was designed to detonate. Quietly, surgically, with no way to walk it back once the wrong box was checked. I'd added it 5 years ago after another executive regime tried to purge operations without realizing ops was the backbone. They thought systems were replaceable, like office furniture. One wrong keystroke, and they found themselves locked out of 3 core platforms and scrambling to rewrite protocol mid-quarter. After that disaster, legal asked me what I needed. I asked for 2 things: structural veto power for architecture termination, and a clause that would enforce it even after I was gone. They gave me both. They didn't think anyone would ever trigger it. Clause 11C required one very boring thing: a clean, verified handoff. A signature, mine, on a specific protocol form, acknowledging transition of operational command. Without that signature, the clause didn't just alert legal. It initiated a full systems lockdown, retroactive audit, and mandatory suspension of the receiving party's access credentials until external review. Simple. She didn't read it. She didn't question it. She didn't even pause when she asked her pet assistant to clear the documentation backlog and get those signatures handled. Just another box to check on her reorg checklist. But someone in her chain, someone under pressure to please, got clever and forged it. I knew the second it happened. At 07:14:03, DocuSign pushed an internal notification to my off-site compliance mirror. Signature recorded. Under my name, IP address flagged, device unknown. There it was. She, or someone acting for her, had submitted a falsified termination handoff. The audit watermark confirmed it. The signature graphic didn't even match. They pulled it from a 2018 doc stored in the HR drive. Sloppy. Rushed. She probably thought it was harmless, bureaucratic, harmless like a seatbelt override switch. But to the system, that forged signature wasn't just a document. It was an act of digital fraud. It was betrayal. And it meant Clause 11C went live. The cascade started instantly. Tiered triggers activated across infrastructure. Legal received a silent ping. Audit logs started duplicating to external review. Even the systems I no longer owned in title recognized the breach. She'd bypassed verification. She'd made herself the sole authority in a dual signature process. She'd removed oversight and then signed off on it. She didn't know it yet, but by lunchtime her name would be flagged in 6 internal systems, not flagged as COO, flagged as process violation, Tier 1 escalation pending. I stared at the e-signature, my name, her shortcut, and I didn't stop it. Because sometimes the best way to make a point is not by fighting, it's by letting the system speak for you. By 9 a.m., the first legal demon would finish its scan and send the clause confirmation packet to the GC and 2 external counsel partners. My original form, still unsigned, was archived with legal custody from the day I left. Her version, timestamped, irregular hash signature, unverifiable source IP. She just told the system I was gone. And the system responded by asking, "Then why does the signature look like a lie?" The trap wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the rules she broke. They served chia pudding in tiny glass jars, grapefruit wedges arranged like a Pinterest altar to clean eating, a potted orchid in the center of the boardroom table that someone definitely rushed from reception 5 minutes before showtime. She stood at the head like a reality TV showrunner about to pitch the next big reinvention, flanked by a personal assistant who looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. "Welcome," she said, her voice dipped in that TED Talk tone she'd picked up from somewhere expensive. "This is about vision, simplicity, speed." She clicked to the first slide, a new org chart, her name at the top in bold. Beneath it, 15 departments, mine included, flattened into a single vertical. No sub-branches, no dual reporting, just a tower of names stacked under a header labeled Unified Ops. Someone, I think it was Langston from Regulatory, cleared his throat and asked, "What about the governance matrix? Oversight tiers, compliance segregation?" She didn't even glance his way, just flicked to slide 2 and said, "Legacy baggage, we're going lean." She used that phrase 3 times in under 10 minutes. Lean. As if gutting every check and balance system we'd built over 20 years was an act of dietary virtue. Her pitch was slick, full of buzzwords and animated transition effects. Streamline this, real-time that. She sounded like a brand deck that had overdosed on LinkedIn posts. What she didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the governance demon had already triggered itself at 07:15, 60 seconds after her forged signature hit the system. It was protocol. Quiet, automated, and dispassionate. A single task loop embedded into the company's legal architecture. When it detects a terminated architect with no verified handoff, it doesn't ask questions. It just begins. The first email had already gone out. Subject, Clause 11C, pending review, timer active. Recipients, GC, Assistant GC, Director of Ops Compliance, External Counsel, redacted. Audit Q Alpha. Inside the email, a flagged discrepancy, 2 versions of the same form, one signed, one not. Signature mismatch, IP irregularity, and a 120-minute countdown clock until mandatory disclosure and lockout sequence. I knew it because I designed it. And at that very moment, while she gestured at a slide labeled, "The future is flat," that clock was ticking down beneath her Jimmy Choo heels. From where I sat in a guest row seat, one she didn't realize had live system access on a sandbox tablet, I watched the timer shrink. 01:44:02, 01:43:51. I didn't speak, didn't move, just sipped the same grapefruit-infused water she probably had flown in from a marketing retreat in Aspen. Around slide 5, she started name-dropping VC contacts, talking about scale, monetization through centralization. She cited a startup that failed upward and called it a case study. She had them half hypnotized. Some nodded, a few furrowed brows, most just blinked like corporate penguins unsure if the ice beneath them was thinning. What they didn't realize was that the ice wasn't thinning. It had already cracked. They just hadn't heard the snap yet. Because once Clause 11C activates, the system doesn't wait for consent. It runs a check on every executive action made by the implicated party post-trigger, every access role, every document signed, every system touched, and it starts building a wall, a legal wall, not of intent, but of evidence. She was giving a speech. The system was building a case, and when the countdown hit 0, it wouldn't be about whose vision was leanest, it would be about who read the damn charter, and who faked their way past it. 9:15 a.m. sharp. She entered like a monarch returning from exile. all measured strut and surgically applied confidence. The air around her practically hummed with the buzz of her own delusions. A glossy black tablet in one hand, her presentation clicker in the other, she didn't bother to acknowledge the boardroom chatter. She just strode straight to the head of the table, smiled like she owned the place, and tapped the first slide. "Let's begin," she said, her tone dipped in power woman lacquer. "Structural realignment, phase 1. The first few slides were the usual fluff, vision, momentum, words like synergy and alignment tossed around like overpriced hors d'oeuvres. She was so caught up in her own narrative that she didn't notice the door open behind her. She didn't hear the soft shuffle of shoes on carpet. But I did. And so did the CEO. The GC's assistant stepped in quietly, holding a crisp, white printout in both hands, fingers trembling just slightly. She didn't hand it to anyone. She just walked over to the far corner of the room where the board's internal display console lived and slid the document into the port. The screen blinked. One slide vanished. Then, slowly, line by line, system-embedded legal confirmation took its place. A neutral female voice, courtesy of the firm's accessibility compliance upgrade, read aloud. Clause 11C has been activated. Executive override invalid. Termination without protocol acknowledgement verified. The words didn't hit like a hammer. They hit like a scalpel. Her smile froze halfway between sincerity and smugness. She turned, just slightly, to look at the screen. And there it was. My name. My digital signature. Time-stamped 07-1403. Right beneath it, the audit watermark. Not hers, not forged. The real one. And in the lower right corner of the screen, blinking like the heartbeat of a machine coming back to life, verification token 4-3-7 Halberd. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The boardroom, once charmed into nodding through her jargon tornado, now sat in brittle silence. Not because they understood the details, but because they recognized the tone, the finality of it, the voice of a system speaking in the language of consequences. Her eyes darted to the CEO. He didn't return the look. Instead, he leaned forward slowly, like a man realizing he might have just let a fox into the henhouse. "What exactly is this?" he asked, but not to her. To no one. To everyone. The assistant didn't reply. She just stepped back, folded her hands, and waited. I watched from the rear row, deliberately seated 2 seats outside the camera's eye line. I didn't blink, because I knew what came next. Clause 11C didn't just flag a violation. It initiated a chain of confirmations, data forensics, operational review, legal holds on infrastructure changes made in the last 7 days. And above all, it froze structural authority of the person in question, effective immediately. The GC wasn't in the room yet, but his office had just received the full activation packet. He'd be here in minutes. And when he arrived, it wouldn't be with questions. It would be with evidence. She reached for her tablet, hands just slightly shaking now, tried to swipe back to her presentation. The system denied it, controls frozen. Her access revoked mid-gesture. Her fingertips hovered in the air like they were trying to touch something that wasn't there anymore. It wasn't. Not for her. Her empire of shortcuts had just run out of road, and the clock had officially hit 0. When Jonathan Bray, our lead counsel, finally walked in, the temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. The guy never rushed, never raised his voice, and never brought paper unless something needed to be said without a screen buffering it. He held a thin manila envelope in one hand and a look on his face like he already hated what he was about to confirm. He paused halfway into the room, caught sight of the boardroom screen blinking verification token, 4-3-7 Halberd, and stopped cold. No good morning, no nod to the CEO, just a slow exhale as his eyes took in the digital autopsy playing out across the display. Without a word, he walked to the table, set the envelope down, and opened it. One sheet of paper, plain, familiar, the original Clause 11C handoff form, my version, the one we'd filed years ago under joint protocol custody. He held it up like a warrant. "Unsigned," he said, calm as a scalpel. He turned his gaze to her. Not angry, not accusatory, just procedural, like a surgeon finding a tumor on an X-ray. "Ms. Lane," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "that is your signature on the submitted handoff, yes?" She opened her mouth too fast. "I don't know what—" He cut her off before she could finish. "We've matched it to 3 other internal forgeries submitted under your authority this quarter. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's escalation." Then he placed the paper on the table, deliberately, right in front of the CEO. This triggers mandatory audit, retroactive, and it elevates the entire event to external counsel for forensic investigation. Silence swallowed the room like a blackout. No one shuffled. No one cleared their throat. You could hear the HVAC kick on in the ceiling. That's how still it got. She didn't sit down, didn't speak, just stared at the screen as if willing it to reverse itself. But the screen didn't care. Clause 11C had been activated. My original was still unsigned. Her version had a verified mismatch. And now the room she strutted into like a queen was looking at her like an unexploded grenade. The CEO leaned back in his chair, face blank, eyes locked on the timestamp. 07-14-03. He reached for his phone with fingers that shook slightly. "Call data forensics," he whispered to his assistant. "Call them now." Miss Lane tried again, voice tighter, sharper. "This is a misunderstanding. That form, someone must have—" Jonathan didn't even look at her this time. "No one else had access to that queue. It was locked to your credentials as of Friday afternoon." Another paper slid from the envelope. A credential log. Her device, her login, her approval key. No one was yelling. No one needed to. This wasn't a scandal being uncovered. This was a mechanism doing exactly what it was built to do. She started to take a step back, just one, and that's when I saw it. The flicker. Not panic, not remorse. Calculation. She was already pivoting, eyes scanning the board members, trying to gauge whose loyalty was wobbly, who might be persuaded, who might want to avoid fallout. She'd played this game before. Rode the edge between chaos and charm, always thinking she could talk her way out. But this time, the rules weren't made of people. They were made of code, of timestamps, of forms that didn't lie, and of a signature that didn't belong to her. The trap wasn't snapping shut. It had already locked. Now we were all just listening to the click echo. They brought me in at 9:43 a.m., not like a hero, not like a villain, just necessary. The atmosphere in that room felt like the air before a tornado touches down. Everything was too still, too controlled, like everyone was holding their breath because they already knew what had just happened, but no one wanted to say it first. I didn't bother to sit, didn't look at her, didn't speak. The CEO stood slowly, gray at the temples, shirt collar slightly wrinkled, like he'd tugged it on in a rush. The man had built an empire on gut instinct and charm. Neither would help him now. "Can this be reversed?" he asked. Not desperate, just tired, like a man who'd spent the morning watching the engine catch fire and only now realized the mechanic wasn't in the building. I reached into my bag and handed him a single document. 1 page, no cover letter, no legalese, title, System Autocorrect Protocol, Internal Escalation Copy. He scanned it, line by line. Everyone else just stared at him as if the ink might whisper the ending before he finished reading. 3 bullet points. Immediate reinstatement of operational architect. Temporary suspension of the implicated party pending investigation. Board-level oversight required for all future terminations involving roles classified under critical architecture or continuity guardianship. His eyes flicked up. Not to me, to her. Her arms were crossed so tight her knuckles had gone white. "This is real?" he asked, quieter now. Bray nodded without hesitation. Codified, approved by this board in 2021, Appendix 4 of the Continuity Charter. All current members signed off. He turned to me next. There was a weight in his face I hadn't seen in years, a man wondering how far back the rot went. "Why didn't you stop this earlier?" I didn't sigh, didn't smirk. I just told the truth. I designed the system to stop itself. He stared at me. No clever response, no deflection, just acceptance. The weight of the realization sinking in, because that was the whole point. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't ego, it was insurance. Not the kind you buy, but the kind you build. Clause by clause, brick by brick, into the foundation of a place you once believed in, for moments just like this. She was still standing, silent. But I could see her now for what she really was, dangerously competent at climbing ladders she didn't understand, swatting away legacy systems like flies while never asking what kept the lights on in the first place. And now she was frozen, suspended, not by me, by the system she abused. The CEO looked down at the document again, then glanced toward the phone in the center of the table. He didn't ask permission, he didn't check the room, he just reached out, pressed a button, and said, "I need a compliance quorum on line 1, now." No cuffs, no shouting, no press release, just silence. Thick and absolute. She didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't even look at the GC when he stood up and gave the nod to security. She just turned, stiff, robotic almost, and walked between them with the dignity of someone who thought this was still a negotiation. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown winding down to 0. The board didn't speak. They didn't need to, not out of malice, not out of cruelty, but out of something far heavier, understanding. This wasn't a witch hunt. It wasn't theater. It was the quiet after a bomb goes off, after the smoke settles and you're still alive, wondering how close it really came. She passed the CEO without a word, past Bray, past Langston. And when she reached the threshold, she turned back, just for a second. Her eyes met mine. She didn't mouth anything, didn't flinch. But there it was, the question. How? How did you do this without lifting a finger? How did I not see you coming? How did it all fall apart and you didn't even raise your voice? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because the thing about building a system isn't that people notice it when it's working. It's that they only understand its power when it fails to protect them. And she wasn't protected anymore. She stepped out into the hallway, flanked by 2 security officers who never touched her, never blocked her path. She walked herself out. She walked her authority out. And she walked out knowing that everything she touched in the last 2 months was now under forensic review. Every approval, every override, every legacy cleanup order. The door clicked softly behind her. Still, no one spoke. The CEO reached into the inside pocket of his blazer, pulled out something small. My badge, the one she deactivated. He held it out without ceremony. I took it. The light on the far wall blinked green as I stepped back into the room. It had never stopped working. "Let's do this properly now," he said. Not as a plea, not as surrender, but as recognition. She had tried to erase the architecture, but the architecture remembered who built it. The hum in the control room was steady, low, mechanical, indifferent, just like it had always been. This was where the real decisions lived. Not in the boardroom with its expensive wood paneling and curated coffee. Not in the CEO's office with its skyline view and polished ambiguity. Here, in this windowless, server-fed vault, reality had no use for performance, only proof. I stood in front of the main terminal. The screen greeted me like an old friend. A flicker, then bold white text on a black background. Escalation lock, pending auth. I placed my badge on the reader, entered my credentials, not with triumph, not with tension, just routine. The same way I'd done it 100 times before, when no one was watching. The screen blinked once, then again. Credentials accepted. Restoration in progress, ETA, 04-1200 called. Behind me, the CEO stood with his arms crossed. He didn't say anything for a moment, just watched the loading bar inch forward, pixels filling like breath returning to a flatlined body. Then, almost to himself, he muttered, "We trusted her." I didn't reply, because what was there to say? That I warned them without speaking? That systems don't reward charisma, they require discipline? That trust is a design flaw unless you build for its failure? No. This wasn't the time for lectures. The system had already delivered the lesson. She'd walked in with charm and a resume full of buzzwords, talked her way through modernization, gutted redundancy protections, called my architecture outdated, flattened departments like spreadsheets, turned multi-layered governance into a single failure-prone hierarchy with her at the top. It worked until it didn't, until the quiet guardrails she mocked fought back. That's the thing about smart infrastructure. It doesn't scream when you ignore it. It documents, logs, waits, and then, when the wrong hands touch it, it executes the fail-safe exactly as designed. The screen cycled again. Network permissions, rolling back. Privilege realignment initiated, redundant oversight channels reinstating. Each line felt less like code and more like an apology from the company itself. Behind the blinking data, behind the hours of rollback and forensic patching, behind the entire orchestration was one truth. I didn't design the system to prevent failure. I designed it to survive betrayal. No fireworks, no vindictive monologue, just restoration, quiet, cold, complete. I glanced one last time at the progress bar, now glowing a steady blue. 4 hours to go. But the real fix? That already happened, when the system remembered who built it.